Okay. Okay. So I believe we are live on YouTube now. This way we could send the link later for those who are usually part of the Tanya class. But now, since it's very early in the morning, um, only Garrett, only you are here. So we are about to start chapter 48. And as I said earlier, chapter 48 is quite a deep chapter. We're going to familiarize ourselves with some second with some ideas from Kabbalah and some some deep concepts that some of them we have already learned before, and some of them will be new, I'm sure. And it's all coming as a continuation of what we have started to learn in the last few chapters about methods on how to develop an emotional relationship with God. We learned already at length how important it is to have an emotional relation with God. It's not just, although in Judaism the main thing is the actual action of the mitzvahs and the Torah and the mitzvahs, but still God wants us to have an emotional relationship with Him, to feel for Him, to love Him, to fear Him, to have the basic responsibility towards Him, to feel connection to Him, to feel associated with Him. And over the last few chapters, we learned a few methods and a few ideas that could help us meditate and develop those emotions inside of ourselves, right? So in chapter 47, we spoke specifically about the fact about we started to talk about a reflection, right? Chapter 46 actually, a reflection. And once we understand that when God is doing something incredible to us, that awakens something, an incredible feeling back to Him. We learned in chapter 47 that this is actually, when we think about the fact that God left everything and took us out of Egypt, which Jewish people back then were in a very tough situation spiritually. They were part of Mitzrayim, they were part of Egypt. And God left everything and took them out of Egypt. And we learned in chapter 47 that we too are bound in the boundaries and the limitations of Mitzrayim, which is quite the actual translation of Mitzrayim is Meitzarim Ugvulim, boundaries, limitations, those things which hold us back and don't let us to continue and to grow in our Yiddishkeit, in our spirituality. And God is helping us and taking us out of Egypt. And that itself, the fact that God is spending time with us and on us, that itself should awaken tremendous love in the heart of every person who thinks about it. And you don't need to be a great scholar. You don't need to be a great, philosopher. You don't need to be every person. When you start thinking about it, you could develop love to God. And today, in chapter 48, we're going to continue to go even further into this kind of ideas, meaning idea of reflection, looking at what God has done to us, and that should awaken a tremendous feeling back to Him. And specifically, we're going to talk about the fact about creation in general and about the world. So before we start, we are right now in the period of the 3 weeks, right? 3 weeks of mourning. Mourning of what? Mourning of the destruction of the temple, right? In about 2 weeks, we're gonna have the Tisha B'av, when we mourn the destruction of the two temples. And this time of year is usually a time when we think about the temple, we think about, we reflect about the idea of the temple. There is a interesting verse in that King Solomon is saying. King Solomon is telling God, one second, you are telling me to build a temple, right? Who built the first temple? It was King Solomon, right? And God told King David, and King Solomon built it. And while King Solomon is building the temple, King Solomon is asking God a very Basic question. And he's asking him, I will say it in Hebrew. Hashamayim u'shmei hashamayim lo yechalkeluch. Which means the heavens and the heavens of the heavens, the entire spiritual worlds cannot contain you. Meaning you're greater than this. Afki habayit hazeh, would this home, would this house, would this structure contain you? The temple is meant to be the house of God, right? What does that mean, the house of God? Can you really contain, can you really limit God, which is limitless, which is infinite, in a house, in a structure? What are we doing here? And this is really the question that we ask when we think about creation. We ask ourselves, what is this? Is this something outside of God? Is this something that God created? If this is something God created, how come this is so finite? How something so finite could contain something so big? The Talmud is bringing an example. There's something about dreams, right? When we dream at night, what?
Halomot,
right? So dreams at night could be very wild, right? You could dream about all different kinds of things, even things which are not practical and not not possible, right? Did it happen to you to dream about something which is completely impossible? Huh? Define impossible.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
Anything's possible, I guess.
Right. Okay. So it's a good point. But things which are not making sense.
I don't know how to fly in real life yet.
Good. Okay. But in the dream you could, right? You fly, you go. But the Talmud is saying there are some things that you can't even dream about. Meaning some things are so impractical, so impossible, that you can't even dream. For example, you can't dream of an elephant in a needle hole. Can you even imagine? You have a needle hole, right? Tiny, tiny hole. And you have an elephant, one of the biggest animals, right? Can you imagine the elephant being in the needle hole? You can't even imagine. In order for the elephant to be in a needle hole, one of two things need to happen. Either you need to downsize the elephant, right? To minimize the elephant until the elephant will fit in a needle hole, or you need to enlarge the needle hole until the elephant will be able to fit in. But for elephant to remain an elephant and a needle hole to remain a needle hole, and both of them working together, meaning the elephant in the needle hole, this is something which is impossible. Correct?
Yeah.
And it's something so impossible you can't even imagine, you can't even dream about. This is an example of something which is called in Hebrew, nimna hanimnaot. It's something which is impossible. Practically impossible. It's not happening. Okay, now, what do we see from this? Why am I bringing this? You have a needle hole. You can't even contain an elephant. How can, so meaning something very small cannot contain something big? Just not happening. How can the world contain God? You get the question?
Yeah, I mean, right, because Hashem creates the world, so high, lower
Hashem
cannot
contain
the
question is,
higher.
So Hashem creates the world and now the world is something else? Or is something that God is found inside? Well, what's happening here? So today, basically, what we're going to learn is going to be about learning about what's called Or and Sof, which means the infinite light of God, and its relationship with our finite world. We're going to learn, first of all, what does that mean? That God is Ein Sof, is infinite. where do we see that the world is finite? And then how is something infinite create something finite? And what's the relationship between them? Okay, it's going to be I would say 4 levels today. Okay, let's first let's define infinite. Okay, is there anything in the world? Is there anything in our physical world that we could think that this is infinite? That it's limitless, it's unlimited?
Oh,
You're saying no. Now, if I would ask you 1 second, think about drops of water in the ocean. How many drops of water are the ocean? Limitless, right? Isn't it?
in practical experience, more than I would be able to count.
Okay, very good. So
Certainly,
you're saying it's countless. It's not
big.
limited.
It's big. It's a lot, but it's not infinite.
Very good. Okay, so it's countless, but it's not limited, right? Basically.
Well, let's count in practical, practical terms. It's it's uncountable for me.
Well, but it's
Somebody could. I mean, if you had enough time,
actually I don't think
hypothetically.
count. Right. Okay, but so for a regular person and a regular lifetime, you can't count how many drops of water are there in the world. But so it's countless, but it's not limited. Meaning even things that we are, I'm just reiterating things which are clear, but just to kind of for the comparison. So even things which are huge, which are enormous in the world, would always be limited. It would always be finite. It's always some kind of a box, some kind of a limit. If you want to talk about energy, okay, nuclear energy, the amount of nuclear energy which are coming out of I don't know, out of a bomb, out of atoms. Although it's inert, but it's limited. It's limited. It's finite. There is some kind of end to it. When we're talking about God, when we say that God is infinite. God is infinite on many levels. Let's talk about 3 things: space, time, and definition. Space, there is no space where the godly light is not there full force. You can't say, oh, God is more in the east than it is in the west. Right? You can't say God is more up and less down, because God is not defined by space. You can't say God is, meaning although we are using it, and we're going to get to it later, but we can't say God is closer to me or further, right? Closer and further are just not definition that we use when we talk about them, right?
Yeah.
Now I know sometimes in davening we do, right? When we say Dir Shosh, for example, there's a verse saying Dir Hashem be'imotzai kol b'yosei karev. Call to God when He's near to you.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll deal with that later. Okay.
Well, there's like unklos. Unklos always translate all of that as like metaphoric, like
Metaphoric,
the
right?
Yikar, Yigale or something.
Right. Because when we're talking about God Himself, God is not limited not defined in this kind of definition. When we talk about time, can I say that God is God becomes older? God grows? Oh, yesterday He was younger than it is today? Absolutely not. As the verse is saying, Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Yimlech, right? God is the king, God was the king, and God is going to be the king. Meaning, God is always there. And then, when we're talking about definition, God doesn't have a specific definition. You can't say God is in a specific color, specific kind of thing. God doesn't, in the essence of God, God doesn't have, you know, God doesn't have those definitions which we are defined by. A good person, a bad person, all these definitions are not are putting us in a box. God doesn't have them. But you would ask, but we do refer to God in different definitions, right? That we'll deal with that later. But here, when we talk about the basic essence of God, God is infinite. Infinite means, and at any level, you cannot put any definition and any limit and any name to it. All right. Clear? Let's see it inside. Okay, let's see it inside. פרק ממחס. והנה, כאשר יסבוינן המשכיל, when the masculine, when the person who is thinking, who is contemplating, is going to contemplate. What is he going to contemplate? The greatness of God, of Ein Sof, meaning of the infinite, of the infinity of God. And his name indicates Ein Sof, which means there is no end, ve'ein case ve'tachlis, and no limit, and no kind of finite definition, klal, le'oyer v'chayus, to the light and vitality and mispashet mimenu yisborach that is coming out of God. From his simple will. Meaning, when God decides to shine his light, so to speak, right, to create the world, God is not bound, is not forced by anything. When I want to do something, okay, when I'm telling you, Garrett, I want you, or I don't know, I want you to help me with setting up the shul, okay? Why do I want you to help me? Because I need you, okay? All right? I need this. By God, when we say that God wanted something, it's not because he needs, it's not because he's forced to. It's nothing who's forcing him to anything. That's what he wants. It's a simple will. And this will is united. It's completely united with his essence in a perfect unity. So there is no definition to God. Limitless, infinite. Now, what about the world? The world which is coming from God. Is it finite or infinite? Now, usually, it's cause and effect, right? The world is working with cause and effect. Usually, the effect is similar to the cause. Meaning, for example, when I'm creating something, when I'm building something, I can only build as much as I can, right? I could only build based on my abilities, correct? I cannot build something which will stay here forever. Does that make sense? I could build something which will stay here for longer than I would, but I cannot build something which will stay forever, will be stronger forever. I am finite, and therefore, whatever I am making is also going to be finite, right? I don't have the power to make something infinite. So now, when we're talking about God, if God is infinite and God is creating a world, the world should be infinite too. Where is finite coming in? No? If God is creating something, where is limit coming in? Now, what does that mean? Let's try to imagine a world infinite. What do you think? How would the world look like if the world would be infinite?
Well, to me, it wouldn't.
How would our life?
It wouldn't look any different to me. I mean, it's It's
Why?
like
Right. I actually I would say, although it's very hard to imagine an infinite world because we are finite beings, it's hard for us to imagine something infinite. But let's use some examples. If the world, if I mean not only the world, talking about every person, every creation, every creature would be infinite. What does that mean? That means that there will be no death. All right, there will be no death. What does that mean? Something is dying. What does that mean that someone is becoming tired? Where does tiredness coming from? If the world will be infinite, meaning if the creation will be infinite, then a person is born, okay, or a person will always be here. I don't know what exactly how is burning, how is birth happening. I don't know, but a person will be here, and the person will always be here. Will never get tired. Will never get hungry because that's it. You are working. You know, the thing is happening. Do you get what I'm saying? This
yeah.
is what
Uh,
what do you
yeah.
think?
Um, well, I was thinking of something else. I don't remember the name, but there's an astronomer, not like
Yeah.
a long time ago. He famously calculated that like if the universe was infinite, like if there was stars, just like infinite stars forever, the whole sky would just be there'd be an infinite amount of light in the sky. The sky would just be like as bright as the sun. We wouldn't see like black with little white dots. And he like
A good
showed it
point.
mathematically, and it was
It's a
like
good point because and
it's like
it,
well, I
it,
guess it can't be
yeah,
infinite. It was a problem. It was it because actually some astronomers they had assumed like, oh yes, it must be infinite.
even if, right. But I guess here's the problem. We call something infinite because we can't count. We don't have it's countless, so and therefore it becomes infinite. But as we're going to see soon, countless and infinite are completely different. Infinite is something very basic. It's in essence. If something is infinite, then infinite is all throughout. By the way, in a way, when you look at the sun, okay, in a way, of course, I can't say that the sun is infinite because the sun was created at some point. But the sun is an example for something which is infinite. Why the sun is an example of something that is infinite? Or I would say differently. I would say the sun and the moon and the stars, they are an example of God's infinity in the world. You get what I'm saying? And why is that? There's something called the Gemara is saying that the Tzva Hashemayim, that the moon and the sun and the stars, chazakim keyom hibaram, which means that the sun never changed. The sun is as strong today as it was 5,700 years ago. And the moon, the same thing. And the stars, the same thing. Meaning, unlike anything else, try to compare a person to the sun. Person wears off, right? You're wearing off every day. You get up in the morning, you're all fresh, and then at some point during the day, you're becoming tired, right? And then you need to sleep, and then you get up again. And then at some point, after many years, a person dies. But the sun doesn't have all these circumstances, right? The sun never gets tired. The sun never goes to sleep. The sun never dies. Right? I think that's just simple physics, right?
That's our
So this
experience
is
of it.
what?
That's our experience of it.
It's our experience of it, right? And the way that the Chassidus explains, this is an expression of God's of the infinite, of God being infinite. But if God would create the world straight, without any tzimtzumim, as we're going to get to it soon, then the entire world will be like that. Every person will be like the sun. Every animal will be like the sun. All right? But in fact, we know it's not like that. The world is very finite. People are finite. Creation is finite. And not only the physical world is finite and limited, the spiritual worlds are also finite and limited. We talk about angels. Are angels infinite? What do you think?
No.
Angels are not infinite. How do I know? Because angels could only grasp some kind of, light of God. The differences between angels and spiritual worlds is how much godly light they're able to contain. How much are they able to grasp? How much are they able to relate to? Meaning, there are differences. The second that there is a difference, that means that there's a limit. One person or one creature or one angel could reach here, and another angel could reach there. So true, it's not the limit of physical space, but it's limit in intellect. All right. So the second we talk a world by definition is finite. Okay? Let's see it inside. Continues like this. Had the world's descendant from the light of God, of the Ein Sof, without contractions, but according to gradual descent, from grade to grade by means of cause and effect. Just like, what is cause and effect? Just like in our world. When I am explaining you something, I am the cause and you are the effect, right? I am explaining you something and now you know it. Okay? And you explain me something and now I know it. So this is Ilo ve'olu. I am causing you to know something. But and if the world would be created in the same way, this world would not have been created in its present form. It can't be. And now what is its present form? It's in a finite and limited order. Now, what Alter Rebbe is quoting a quote from the Talmud that talks about the finiteness of the world. From the earth to the, how do you call it? Firmament.
One of those
To
Bible words. Nobody,
right?
The word nobody actually uses in, except for like translating a Bible word. So, exactly. The firmament.
Your word, like you're wondering, like who made it up, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like the word phylactery. You ever?
So the distance of 500 years. What's phylactery? It's tefillin, right?
Yeah, it's like a strange word. Like, why even bother using this? If you're not going to know what a phylactery is. Like, what's a tefillin? You describe it to somebody. What's tefillin? Oh, it's a phylacteries. Oh, phylacteries. Okay, now I know.
Right, now I know.
Rakia.
And so the same thing with Rakia. So Rakia basically is heaven. Okay, it's the sky. So if you want to walk from the earth to the sky, it will take you 500 years. All right? This is what the Talmud is saying. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? Is it a regular 500 years? A different? I don't know, but that's not the point here. The idea is we put a limit. There is a number. It's a number. The earth is this big. And then now we know that there are 7 rekim. There are 7 kind of heavens. So between one heaven to the next, it's also 500 years. And also the extent of each heaven, of each level, is also different 500 years. Meaning, the point that Alter Rebbe wants to make here is every world has a limit. Everything in the world has its limit. And Alter Rebbe continues, even the world to come in the higher level of Gan Eden, we're talking about spiritual worlds. The abode of the souls of the great tzaddikim and the souls themselves. We know that the souls are coming from a very high place, under the throne of God. And also the what's it called? The angels, which are lower than the souls. All these spiritual things, this is also fine. It's also limited. And how do I know, or where does their finiteness being expressed? For there is a limit to their apprehension of the light of God. There is some kind of limit. There's some kind of I would say there are levels of how much are you able to relate to God. Not every angel is able to relate to God at the same level. Not every soul could relate to God at the same level. We know, right? We know that there was a way that we could relate to God. There's a way a tzaddik could relate to God. 2 different things. But a soul is something spiritual. So if it's something spiritual, it's something connected to God Himself. It should be limitless. No, it's not. It's finite. And therefore, hence, there is also a limit to their enjoyment that they derive from the rays of the Shekhinah, and the pleasure in the light of God. And this is what the neshamas, souls, are doing up in heaven. In Gan Eden, what is there? They're sitting and enjoying godliness, connection to God. Now, for they are incapable of deriving enjoyment and pleasure in the light of an infinite order, without being nullified out of their existence and returning to their souls. Meaning, for something finite to enjoy something infinite is just not possible. We can't even imagine something infinite. It's hard for us even to imagine. So what does that mean to enjoy it? So now, but the idea is what the Rebbe wants to make is, the point that the Rebbe wants to make here is the world is finite. The world is finite, and even, by the way, even when God is revealing Himself in the world in an infinite way, it's also going to be somewhat connected and contained in the finite world. Let me give you an example. It is a story in the prophets, in the Nevi'im, that the story of Elisha, that a woman, once a widow, came to Elisha. It's also one of the Haftorahs, of the Parsha of Vayera.
The Shunamit.
The Shunamit, exactly. The Shunamis came to Elisha and said that she's a widow and she's, great death that her husband left her with, and now this one that basically she owes the money to wants to now come and take her 2 kids to be his servant. And after back and forth with Elisha, what Elisha is answering here, what? He's asking her, what do you have at home? She's telling him, I don't have anything at home. I have a few empty barrels, a few empty vessels. So Elisha said, look, go to your neighbors and borrow vessels, borrow barrels, borrow pots, borrow whatever you can borrow, and come home with all the things that you were able to gather. Lock the door. Only you and your children. No one should be in the house. And um, and take 1 barrel of oil, okay, 1 little barrel of oil, 1 jug of oil, and pour to all the barrels, to all the vessels that you have. And the oil just poured and poured and poured and poured and poured and poured and poured until she didn't have more vessels. And then what happened when she didn't have more vessels? The flow stopped. Now, what's happening here? On one hand, the oil became infinite, just going and going and going. Just 1 jug of oil, and just going and going and going. For, could feel, as long as there is a vessel, an empty vessel, the vessel will be filled with oil. But the second there is no vessel, the flow stops. Because even an infinite blessing, when it's coming to our world, becomes finite. Even when it's expressed itself in the world, okay, it still needs to be limited to a barrel, a vessel, it's something. You don't have the vessel, it's just not going to come. You get it?
Yep, nowhere to put it.
Exactly, you know where to put it. Meaning, and this is why, this is because we are not capable of connecting and relating to infinite. We need to contain it in vessels. Why? Because we are finite. Imagine, just an example. You need to charge your phone, okay? You decide, why should I go to my house when I have this little, plug? I will go to the, what's it called? Where all the energy is coming from. What's the name of it?
Oh,
Where do energy come from? Where electricity come
from? The dynamo, the
power,
the
powerhouse. What? I will go to the powerhouse itself, and I will connect to the electricity there. What's going to happen? Your phone is going to blow up. Chances are the person holding the phone will blow up too, right? Why? Because it needs to go through some kind of, transformation.
Yeah.
It needs to be, and then you could have it, charging your phone safely. Now we're going to get to it soon. Like next week we're going to talk about it. More about the difference between sovev and mamale. These words. But let's continue here. So the Rebbe says, "Vehine." Now, plot yisasim tzomim. For the exactly the details, the details of the constructions, what are they and how they work. Ein kan mokim bi'ulam. Tell the Rebbe, this is not the place to explain it, because this is a side point. We're not here to discover the contractions and how God created the world. We just want to make a point. And we want to make a point. We want to talk about contraction. We want to talk about how God created the world, but without all the details. Okay? But this is what we need to know.
The short version.
In general. Yeah.
The TLDR.
TLDR. What's that?
That's a like internet acronym for like a short version of something. It's an acronym for too long, didn't read.
Oh, okay.
So you have a really long article. You say like the TLDR.
TLDR. Okay, you have it in Hebrew too. You have it in Hebrew too. Yeah, TLDR. So it's the same here. Exactly. TLDR. I'm not going to go into it. In other places, in Kabbalah explains it beautifully. But here, this is what we need to know. In general. And here we're talking about is something in the nature of an obscuring and concealment of the flow of the light and vitality. Meaning, the light of God, the way it is in God himself, cannot create a safe and finite world. So what does God need to do? God needs to conceal himself in order that a finite world should come out. So that the light and vitality, the way they are in God, should illuminate. So illumine, and reach the lower creatures in a revealed manner. In order to make them exist. Let's just give an example. You know, the word second. Only an extremely minute measure of light God needs to kind of bring out. So they be in a state of limitation, a state of being fine. If I would ask you, just an example to explain, is every genius teacher? I'm not saying every teacher is a genius. What?
Yeah.
But I'm asking,
Neither,
is every genius
neither
a
one.
teacher?
Absolutely
Neither.
not.
Absolutely not, right? Why?
They're usually terrible.
Exactly. Usually, the more genius you are, the less teacher you could be.
And they can't communicate.
Exactly. Why?
With the common folk.
Exactly. Because the more genius you are, the less you're able to contract, to I would say, to minimize your light of the wisdom and the understanding that you have in your mind, to minimize it so a child can understand. Usually it's just not working together, right? In the same way here.
So some can, and those are the special few.
And this is exactly this
special gift.
Exactly. A special gift to overcome the this wisdom that they have. And although they have such such brilliance, and they are all over the place, they're able to maintain it, to contain it in a very few words that kids could understand. This is a special gift. In the same way, lehavdil, but Hashem also, in order for the infinite light of God to create finite world, it need to be contracted. It need to be minimized. And this is the way God created the world. God basically, it says in Kabbalah, again, without going into the details, that God completely removed his infinite light and then created a new light, which is limited and is able to be contained in the physical world. There's a story actually coming from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. It's a story. It's an analogy talking about a child, a prince, which he was a child, and one day just some craziness came into his head, and he decided to eat a turkey. He became a turkey. He saw the turkey, playing under the table and everything. So he decided to eat a turkey. He went under the table and completely got undressed because kids are going without clothing, and he started eating, stuff from the floor, dirty things, and started to stop talking. Right? He started to just, completely being like a turkey. And they brought psychologists and psychiatrists and everyone to try to help the guy. And the guy is saying, "I don't understand what you want. I am a turkey. I'm not a child." A psychologist could work with a child, with a person, with a human being. A psychologist cannot help a turkey. No? Just a psychologist they don't work this way. Until a wise person came and told the king, "Here, I'm coming, I will come and help you. I am going to heal your child." And he got undressed, went under the table, this wise person went under the table to be together with the child and started to eat stuff from the floor the same way. At some point, after a few minutes, turkey child, so this person asked him, "What are you doing here? Like, what are you doing here?" Child told him, "What do you mean? I'm a turkey." The person said, "I'm a turkey too." "What do you mean? I'm a turkey. You're a turkey. I'm a turkey." "Oh, that's very nice." And they started to become friendly with each other. Then the wise person kind of motioned to the people upstairs, "Throw me a piece of clothing, one piece of clothing." And he told the child, "Look, what do you think? Turkeys? We are turkeys. You think we have to remain undressed? Of course, we could have clothing. Turkeys can't have clothing. Of course, good turkeys can have clothing." The child here, "Oh, turkey can have clothing. Okay." So he put on clothing. And then he told them, a day later, motion the people, "Give me some good food." He's throwing some good food, and he's telling the child, "Look, turkeys don't just need to eat dirty things on the floor. We could also enjoy some good bread, some good meat." And the turkey got convinced. And then after a few days, he told him, "Look, turkeys don't just need to be under the table. We could sit around the table like regular people." What's wrong? And he's able to convince him until he got him to be a full normal human being. What happened there? If the wise person will come again and try to convince the child, doesn't make sense what you're doing, and it wouldn't work. You need to go down to the world of the child. You need to go down to that world to contract yourself, to be there, to be down under the table. And over there, you will be able to influence. This is just an example of what symptom is. Now, let's just finish the idea here. Now, and we've been talking about God contracted his light to be limited. And I said that the Rebbe, the light and vitality that now is revealed within them, within this contraction, is very, very considered as nuts, they say here. Compared as nothing. When it's so minimized that now you can't compare anything. It's just like nothing to compared to what it was before. There is no proportion or relationship between them. Meaning, and here is here the Rebbe is saying what we started saying earlier. If I would ask you, what's the proportion of one drop from the ocean to the entire ocean? What's the proportion? One drop in the entire ocean. Is there a proportion here? Is there a comparison?
It's tiny.
It's tiny, right? But it is. There is some kind of proportion. After all, the ocean is made out of many, 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 many drops of water, right? Same, is there any proportion between $1 and $1 billion? Well, of course there is, because $1 billion is made out of $1 billion, right? But now, is there a proportion between $1 billion or the number billion infinite to something which is infinite? Is there any proportion here? No proportion. Compared to infinite to something which is infinite, 1 in billion is the same thing. Because again, infinite is something which is very in the essence of the thing. 1 in billion is the same thing compared to infinite. Let's see it in a second. As the term proportion is understood in number values, where the number 1, stands in a certain ratio to the number 1 million. For it is a 1 millionth part of it. Bottom line, a million is made out of many, many, many ones. But as regards to thing which transcends finite and numeration, there is no number. There is no number that can relative to it. There can be relative to it. There's no proportions. For a billion and a trillion, when compared to infinity, compared to infinity, do not even attain the relevancy of the value of one in comparison with a billion and trillion. But they consider it as nothing. In the same way, we're going to see that this is the life of the way that God created the world and how it plays out. Now, next week, now it's already 7 a.m, so you do have to go. But so next week we're going to go and see how it plays out in actuality, in creation itself, how creation happens and what's the difference, the different lights that God used in order to create the world. But here, the point where the Rebbe starts here in chapter 48 is when we talk about God creating the world, we are talking about a major contraction God needs to do in order to create a finite world. This is basically what we established here today. Next week, we're going to see how it plays out practically. All right? Any questions or comments?
No, I look forward to the practical application of this.
Very good. Yeah, now it's a little more philosophical and kabbalistic.
Still, it's good though. It's still good to contemplate.
Now it gave you some food for the thoughts for the next for the rest. We're starting the day.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, Rabbi.
Okay. All the best. We will be in touch.
Yeah. Right. When are you coming back?
So at the end of July.
Okay.
We still have another 2 weeks. Yeah.
All right. Well,
okay.
All the best, and I hope
we'll be in touch.
going